Oh, right. Welcome to pro football. First 50 years where we take the past and we bring it back to life. Now, I'm strictly talking the first 50 years here, 1920 to 1970. And especially if you're going to go back in time, check out like a game from the 1920s or the 30s. Oh, yeah, I mean, you can go online, find the box score, who won, who lost, who scored a touchdown, how far a field goal was that someone kicked, what the attendance was, where the game was played at. You might find starting lineups for each team. But exactly what happened during the game? Well, thanks to old newspaper articles, we get to take a little bit of a deeper dive into each and every game during the first 50 years of professional football. Now, little news flash here for you. Ain't no fancy videos here or nothing like that. All there is you and me for the next 30 to 60 minutes. So if that's all right with you, let's get it on. And today's game, a rematch. Week 4 of the 1959 season, and we got a rematch already. Ooh. The results will be the same as they were in the first game. The Chicago Cardinals at the Cleveland Browns at Cleveland Stadium, October 18th, 1959. As I said, these two teams wound up playing each other in week 2 of the season. This is week 4 of the season, so 4 weeks into the season, the Cardinals got the Browns out of the way. The Browns got the Cardinals out of the way. And, of course, there was only 12 games played in the season. So there was only 8 games left in the season after this. But it's just two teams just going in, opposite directions. It was not a good season for the Cardinals. I guess you can also say maybe not a super spectacular season for the Browns because, when you got Paul Brown, the Browns with a lot of good players they had, finishing 7-5 like they did in the 59 season, tied for second place. It was a winning season. They were in second place, but you expect a little bit more. After 8 weeks, they were tied with the Giants. Giants and the Browns were both 6-2. 4 games left to go in the season. It was anybody's season. They were going to play each other one more time, which might have been the deciding factor in the 1959 title race, but it was not meant to be. I'll pull up the schedules. But, for the Cardinals, this season was just a disaster. They were trying to get out of Chicago. They would get their wish in 1960. They would get out and they would move to St. Louis, where they would become the St. Louis Cardinals. But this was just, they had a hard time getting fans. They were always playing like the redheaded stepchild to the Chicago Bears. But to be truthful, most of the time, the fans want to see a winner. And if you're not producing on the field, you're not going to get people in the stands, right? So let's pop up the Cleveland Browns for the 1959 season. Here we are. Now, they didn't do super spectacular in the exhibition season. They finished 2-4. They would have to win their final, the final exhibition game would be against the Bears. So for the first 6 games here. So they were 1-4 going into their final exhibition game, and they beat the Bears. So actually that was a very impressive win, although it was an exhibition because the Bears were actually 5-0 going into that final exhibition game. But it goes 2 ways. I keep saying it's like if you're playing exhibition, it's a game. You want to win the game, but especially if you're trying out a lot of maybe your rookies to see who might make the team and all. If you wind up losing, it's not the end of the world because it is just exhibition. Of course, the big thing is what happens during the regular season. And as we'll see here, the Browns would lose 2 of their first 3 games. They lost to the Steelers. They lost to the Giants at home. They only scored 6 points against the Giants at home. So the one lone win was against the Cardinals in week 2. It was a muddy affair. The Cardinals had a hard time holding on to the ball. I remember, I know the Cardinals lost 4 fumbles. One directly led to a touchdown. They also threw an interception because they were behind, then they had to just keep throwing the ball. So they had 5 turnovers, the Cardinals did, in this game where they would lose to the Browns 34-7. But so this one was a little bit closer. I mean, it's still the outcome was still the same. The Browns would wind up beating the Cardinals, but a little bit closer, But starting with this game, the Browns would go on and win 5 games in a row. So after they beat the Redskins here on November 15th, right, they would be 6-2. Tied with the Giants for first place. Anybody's division. You see here, the Browns would still have a game to be played against the Giants, which could have been a deciding factor, but that wasn't the case. The Browns lost a close, tough 1-point loss here to the Steelers and another 1-point loss to the 49ers. Then they got blown out by the Giants. So it was just not meant to be. They said, I mean, it was a successful season. Is that they had a winning record. And, 8 games into the season, they were tied for first place. But to lose 3 out of the final 4 had to be very, very disappointing for Paul Brown and all the Brown fans. Especially if you see, the roster, especially on the offensive side, they had a lot of good players. But not so much for the Cardinals. If you look here, the Cardinals actually had a good exhibition season. They played 7 preseason games. They played a grand total of 19 games, 7 preseason games, although one of them was against the Toronto Argonauts. I can zoom this in here a little bit. They played in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, right? They would win. So this was their first game of the season. It's a exhibition season. They would win 55-26. Now, I haven't done a video on this one yet. I will be. So I don't know. Was the first half the Canadian Football League rules, the second half was the NFL. When the Giants played the Ottawa Rough Riders, I believe it was in 1951, their first game of the season, the first half was CFL rules, and they would want to blow the Rough Riders out of the water. But the first half was CFL rules. The second half was NFL rules. So maybe it was the same thing here. I don't know. As I said, I'll find out when I do a video on it. But you'll notice here, they beat Toronto. Then let's see. Then they actually wound up beating the Colts, of all things. But this was exhibition. But you see, they played the Colts, the Steelers, the 49ers, the Rams, the Steelers, the Lions, and the Argonauts. 7 preseason games. They would play the Steelers 2 times. Wow. Right. But they were 4-3 in the exhibition. So, and then, of course, they won the first game of the season. So after week 1, they beat a Redskin team. The Redskins were not very good. They were just a little bit better than the Cardinals were. But after they beat the Redskins, put up almost 50 points on them, they were 1-0. I was like, oh, okay, maybe we might have a good season. But nope. You'll see right here, right? They lost 10 out of their 11 last games of the season. They would somehow put up 45 points against the Steelers, and that was pretty much it. That was the success of their season. Now they also had 2 of their home games were played in Bloomington, Minnesota. So they were the home team at Metropolitan Stadium, where the Vikings would start playing in 1961. They were a home team in Bloomington, Minnesota, here against the Eagles on October 25th, and then against the Giants here on November 22nd in Bloomington, Minnesota. They were a home team once again. They would lose both these teams. They would lose both these games. I said, the final 11 games was really bad for the Chicago Cardinals. Now, as I said, if you look at their roster, you're like, oh my God, who was on this team? A very, very weak roster, to say the least. They did have Ollie Matson the year before, but they traded him away to the Rams. I believe it was they got 8 players and a draft pick from the Rams in return for Ollie Matson. So, that was a huge haul. But, for this 59 season, didn't help either team. The Rams wound up in last place, and the Cardinals wound up in last place. So Ollie Matson had a couple good games for the Rams, but it just was not meant to be for the Rams. And as I said, the thing was is for the Cardinals is that they had a little bit of a weak roster, so they figured if they could maybe strengthen their roster, lose maybe their best player, especially on offense. They had Dick Night Train Lane on defense, okay, but if they strengthen their roster, if they get rid of their best offensive player, but strengthen their roster with some other players, maybe they figured they might be better off, but it just was not meant to be. I said, but interestingly though, there's one game here they played on, of all things, 9/11, 1959 against the Steelers. They played in St. Louis, Missouri at Busch Stadium, where in 1960, the Chicago Cardinals would move out of Chicago and go to St. Louis, where they would become the St. Louis Cardinals. And, of course, the home was Busch Stadium. So, but this was not a, you see right here, the Cardinals finished 2-10. I mean, just in the bottom of the Eastern Division, just absolutely horrible season. I said, although, there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel because they got their wish. They got to move out of Chicago and they moved to St. Louis. But I mean, they had some nice seasons. Of course, they didn't make the playoffs. I believe it was until 1974 when they were in St. Louis. But I mean, at least they got out of Chicago. Now, this game was played at Cleveland Stadium. So let's take a look at what does Wikipedia got to say. Good old Cleveland Stadium here. This is what I was used to when I growing up watching. If any time I would see the Indians playing at home on TV. It wasn't a lot because the Indians were not super spectacular, especially in the early 70s and all that. So they weren't on TV a ton, although they were. Well, I used to live in Long Island. So obviously, I got to see the Yankee games and the Met games. So when the Yankees would play in Cleveland, you would see Cleveland Stadium. Now, my first recollection of watching Cleveland Stadium, I mean, I can't say first recollection, but I do know I remember the Giants played. It was 73. They played the Browns in 1973 at Cleveland Stadium. So I remember I got to watch that game on TV, and man, that was a heartbreaker. The Giants went up 10-0, couldn't score another point the rest of the game. Then the Cleveland, it was 10-0. Then it was 10-3. Then it was 10-6. Then it was 10-9. The Cleveland kicked a field goal right at the end, toward the end of the fourth quarter. Wound up winning 12-10. Oh, just killed me. Absolutely killed me. All right, Wikipedia, Cleveland Stadium. Here we go. Some people refer to it as the mistake by the lake. Right? Cleveland Stadium, commonly known as Municipal Stadium or Cleveland Municipal Stadium, is a multi-purpose stadium in Cleveland, Ohio. It was one of the early multi-purpose stadiums built to accommodate both baseball and football. The stadium opened in 1931 and is best known as the longtime home of the Cleveland Indians from 32 to 33, and again from 37 to 1993. Let's see here. And it also says here, including 1937 to 46, when the games were split between League Park and Cleveland Stadium. It was also the home of the Cleveland Browns, obviously of the National Football League. 1946 to 49, and they were in the All-American Football Conference starting in 1950. They would be in the NFL. But, I mean, you can see right here, the Cleveland Browns were in the stadium for 50 years. In addition to hosting other teams, other sports, and concerts, the stadium hosted 3 All-American Football Conference championship games, 6 NFL championship games. Served as one of the host venues of the 48 and 54 World Series, 4-time host of the Major League Baseball All-Star Game. And, of course, it was the original site of, obviously, the Dog Pound, which is a good thing. But then, unfortunately, Red Right 88 and The Drive. 2 things that are not near and dear to Cleveland Brown fans' hearts. The Drive, of course, is in '86 when the John Elway led the Drive, which tied the game up, sent it in overtime, and the Broncos were winning overtime. Of course, Red Right '88 was when they lost to the Raiders, 14-12. Brian Sipe would throw an interception in the corner in the end zone. But let's see. Through most of its tenure as a baseball facility, the stadium was the largest in the major league by seating capacity, seating over 78,000. Superseded was only by the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. When the Dodgers left Brooklyn, they moved to Los Angeles and they played in the Memorial Coliseum from 58 to 61. Now, if it was sold out, there would be over 90,000 people in the Memorial Coliseum to see the Dodgers play. So, and in 1959, the Dodgers went to the World Series. And games 3, 4, and 5 were played in Memorial Coliseum, and it was over 90,000 people for each of the World Series games. Unbelievable. I mean, you figure there's probably close to, for 3 games they played, there was close to almost 280,000 people watched 3 baseball games. Wow, holy cow. Of course, former Brown owner Art Modell, who I can't stand, took over control of the stadium from the city in the 70s. While his organization made improvements to the facility, it continued to decline. So, it's unfortunately it's a fantastic, amazing sport that we have with football, right? We got to talk about, but it's always a business. You got to remember that. And, it just, I don't know. I mean, what all went into the negotiations, no idea. But I mean, just to take the team out of Cleveland, did you really try everything you could? You took a team that was at Cleveland and the Cleveland Browns, and you took them out and you put them in Baltimore. I mean, man, but it is what it is. The Browns played their final home game at the stadium in December 1995, after which they renamed the Baltimore Ravens. As part of the agreement between Modell, the city of Cleveland, and the NFL, the Browns were officially deactivated for 3 seasons, and the city was required to construct a new stadium on the Cleveland Stadium site. So, I mean, I don't know. Why didn't they try to do that beforehand? I mean, they could have been like, hey, Art, we're gonna knock the stadium down. We're gonna rebuild, put a beautiful new stadium up for the Browns and the Indians, right, or whatever, and would you have to find them a place to play for a couple of years, right? But it is what it is. The impetus of the Cleveland Stadium came from city manager William R. Hopkins and Cleveland Indians president Ernest Bernard, who thought the attraction of a stadium would benefit area commerce in general and their own commercial interests in downtown Cleveland in particular. Let's see. 1928, Cleveland voters passed, I guess it was $2.5 million levy for a fireproof stadium on the lakefront. Actual construction costs overran that amount by over $500,000. So, of course, close to over $3 million. So you got this here, right? I mean, look at that. It's huge, right? Huge stadium. But it's under construction in 1931. The stadium was dedicated on July 1st, 1931. 2 days later, it hosted a boxing match with Max Schmeling and Young Stribling, with 37,000 fans in attendance. Wow. The Indians were there. The stadium was built for football as well as for the Indians, who played their first game there on July 31st, 1932. Yeah, a view of center field. It's back in the background. You can see that there's the Lake Erie out there. Just a shame that it started deteriorating, and obviously one of those things you don't know. Was it feasible to try to upgrade the stadium? But some of them, the answer is yes. Some of the answer is no. So the Cleveland Browns, original members of the All-American Football Conference, began playing at the facility in 1946 and played there through 1995, 50 years. It was the site of the All-American Football Conference championship games in 1946, 48, and again in 49. Browns joined the NFL in 1950 and hosted the championship games in 50, 52, 54, 64, and 68. winning titles in 1950, 54, and 64. Although, well, I mean, and then of course in 1968, they would win the championship game in '68, but they would go on to the Super Bowl where they wound up losing to the Jets. First Brown game at the stadium was also the first All-American Football Conference game when the Browns hosted the Miami Seahawks. On September 6, 1946, the Browns won 44-0 and drew 60,000 fans. Wow. What was then a record for a professional football crowd. I mean, you got to remember Ohio. I mean, hey, of all things, Ohio is a very popular state for football. Very, very popular. I mean, especially if you're going back into like the 20s, a lot of, Akron, the Akron Pros, like in 1925, I'm thinking the Cleveland Bulldogs, the Canton Bulldogs, 1922 teams are called the Bulldogs, the Akron Pros. A lot of teams played in Ohio. All right, so we also got the stadium was also the site of two notable moments in Cleveland sports history, Browns history, the divisional playoff game. Right side was intercepted in the end zone with less than a minute remaining in the game, resulting in 14-12 loss to the Raiders. Red Right 88. 6 years later, during the championship game, 86 championship game, John Elway led the drive, the 98-yard drive, with 5:32 left that tied the game and sent it into overtime. Of course, then the Browns wind up winning 23-20. The final game was played on December 17, 1995, an emotional 26-10 win over the Bengals. That's when Bill Belichick was the coach of the Browns. Now, in 1994, they went to the playoffs. They had a very successful season with Bill Belichick. I think it was like injury issues they had. Plus, I think it was some injury issues, but also knowing that this season they were, of course, thanks to Art Modell, partly, thanks to Art Modell, they knew they were packing up and leaving, going to Baltimore. And of course, he packed up, he moved to Baltimore, and Bill Belichick was no longer the coach of the team. So it was a very, very, very tough season. Very, very tough season. All right. There you can see him in seating capacity. I mean, it was just, a lot of people played there. I mean, a lot of kids could sit in there. But unfortunately, its time was, as you got into the 80s and the 90s, it was starting to fall apart. And, especially with a lot of teams starting to build newer stadiums and all that. Unfortunately, you got to keep up. Got to keep up with the Joneses. And for whatever the reason was, I guess it took, Art Modell to pick the Browns up and move them to Baltimore for them to say, hey, we got to get a new stadium in here. Well, maybe it was a little too late, but at least the Browns are still around though. So thank goodness for that. All right. So let's see some pictures here. All right. Here we are. Now this right here, this is the program for this game. Vintage. I don't know. It's on eBay. I'm not sure if it's still for sale on eBay, but if you want the program for this game, hey, go to eBay. Cleveland Browns, Chicago Cardinals, October 18th, 1959. I mean, you look and see. I mean, this one's funny. I love this one. This one, when the Browns and the Eagles, the Browns player has his hands open. I guess it was a pass or whatever. He misses the football and it lands in the ref's hands. This is 1958, October 12th, 1958. I guess the Browns and the Cardinals played, and this was the pennant of the program. You can see a lot of these programs here. These are the Browns and the Steelers. It's just some of these pictures are really, really funny. Really, really funny. Now here's a shot of it right. Here's a beautiful, beautiful shot here. Now you can see it's it's old time. I mean, there were some structured view seats. Here we go. Oh, I don't know. Is this well, that might be the new one. Let me get some here we go. Now, apparently Getty, I mean, I don't know where they get all these pictures from, but Getty, there's over 116,000 pictures of Cleveland Municipal Stadium. Crazy. Here it is, Cleveland Municipal Stadium. In the background, you see the Lake Erie, I believe that is. Let's see what we got here. There we go. There's another shot of Municipal Stadium. I mean, you can see where it's just, it's like double decked almost all the way around. Then in the background there, you get just a bunch of people. There we go. All right, here we go. All right. I don't know what year this is, but hey. Yeah, once again, you can see. I mean, when it would get cold there, boy. I'll tell you what, that divisional round game against the Raiders in 1980, it was freaking cold. I don't know what the temperature was, but it was so cold. I remember the Browns missed. Each team scored 2 touchdowns. The Raiders managed to kick their extra points, but the Browns missed both their extra points. That's why they were, they were kind of iffy as far as whether they could have kicked the field goal or not to win the game. That's why Brian Sipe tried to throw the ball in the end zone to win the game with a touchdown. Because, I mean, they were close. They were down around the 20 or somewhere around there, which normally, which wouldn't be too far of a field goal. But during that game, it was so cold. I mean, they missed both their extra points. So for them to think that they can actually kick a field goal under those weather conditions. There's another, I don't know what game this is here. It looks like that could be maybe the Steelers are playing against, but 1959 Browns. There's one thing right here is that, the one thing the Browns had a hard time replacing this guy after that was against the 49ers, but this is after he retired after the 55 season. The Browns, I mean, they had wide receivers. I mean, they had running backs. They had offensive linemen. They had a couple nice quarterbacks, but they were never, ever able to replace this guy. So, all right. Well, here we go. Here's a team photo. 1959 Browns. There you go. There was only 36 players on the team. Now I didn't count out how many guys there, but all right. Well, so let's get a little bit of pregame action going on here. So let's see, what do we got here? October 17th, 1959, of the Lima News. All right. What do they got to say on the game? The Lima News. All right, here we go. All right. Let me refresh the page here. All right. So the Browns test the Cards' touted offense on Sunday. A crack offense and a sound defense will be featured in opposition here Sunday when the Cleveland Browns host the Cardinals. The Cards, the only squad the Browns have beaten this season, because remember, the Browns, lost their opening day game to the Steelers, then they beat the Cardinals, then they lost to the Giants. Have beaten this season while dropping 2, led the National Football League in yards gained. The Browns have the best defense in the league. The forecast is for fair weather Sunday. This could mean twin trouble for the Browns and Cardinal speedsters Bobby Joe Conrad and John David Crow. A couple good, very good players But I mean, I said they had Dick Knight, Train Lane, like on defense, and Bobby Joe Conrad, but John David Crow was very, very good. But there wasn't a whole heck of a lot else on that Cardinal team. In the Browns win over the Cards, Conrad and Crow got bogged down in the mud. But on Sunday, they should display the form they showed earlier. Browns coach Paul Brown calls Crow the Jim Brown of the Cardinals because of his speed and power. Crow hasn't done much in the regular season play this year, but the potential is there. Conrad is 7th in the league in rushing and 2nd in scoring. He is a smart, alert runner and a good receiver. While the Browns are the stingiest on yardage in the loop, they have in fullback Jimmy Brown, the NFL's leading crown gainer. If the Browns can get their entire offense working, along with the Browns' efforts, the game could be a repeat of the one 2 weeks ago. And it would be. Especially if you figure the Cardinals only score 7 points in both games. All right, so now we got the Cleveland Press, October 17th, 1959 edition of the Cleveland Press. Browns Cards. Let me refresh the page here. Battle for survival. Which is true. You know what I mean? Because you figure whoever would lose this game would have 3 losses. And certainly not out of it by any stretch of the imagination. Although they would be, because nobody had a crystal ball back then. Nobody still has a crystal ball. But in the Eastern Division, the Giants would only lose 2 games. So if, one of these teams theoretically, would be out of it already after 4 weeks, which would wind up being the Cardinals, because they would lose this and they would have 3 losses and they would be already out of it, because the Giants all went all season long, only lost 2. So fans who relish their football on the spectacular side will have their day at the stadium tomorrow as the Browns and the Cards wage a struggle for survival in a National Football League race. A crowd of 50,000 is expected for the 2 p.m. kickoff. Now, you think about it. It's only week 4, and they're talking about survival already, right? Especially in a 12-game schedule, every game is very important. Since both teams already have 2 defeats, the loser of this one will be so deep in the hole that it will take close to a miracle finish in order to make a full recovery. Cleveland is favored by 4.5 points, but it's typical of the early weeks in this unsettled season that the Browns' lone victory came in the only game they were rated underdogs against these same Cardinals. That was 2 weeks ago in Chicago when the Browns won the deceptively large 34-7 score. Actually, the Browns outgained the Cards by a mere 26 yards that day. Fumbles on the Cardinals' part. The Cards made 6 of them and lost 4. Cost Chicago a chance for an early 7-7 tie and later gave Cleveland 2 easy touchdowns. Now, one of those fumbles led directly to a touchdown. The other fumble, I believe, got picked up and ran back to the 11-yard line of the Cardinals where the Browns were able to score. So 2 fumbles were almost directly turned into 14 points. The club still gained 572 yards in the rain and on the treacherous field, and a dry day tomorrow should make the customers' heads swivel in following the action back and forth. Last year, Cleveland and Chicago took each other apart to the tune of nearly 1,500 yards and a total of 125 points in their 2 games. The Browns won both track meets and now have a 17-2 advantage in their series. Jim Brown, once again the league's leading rusher, has enjoyed great success against the Cards, and he'll need more tomorrow to stay ahead of the Rams' Ali Matson. The Los Angeles fullback is only 32 yards behind Brown's 314 total. Bobby Mitchell has gained only 107 yards rushing so far, but has been on the verge of shaking loose for long gainers on several occasions. The Cards have gained more yardage than any other team in the NFL with their double and triple wing T offense featuring reverses, double reverses, pitch outs, and a maze of passes. King Hill, sophomore quarterback from Rice, operates Coach Frank Pop Ivy's wide assortment of razzle-dazzle plays. Yeah, so that's what their offense was predicated on, a lot of handing off and pitching out, stuff like that. And when they played 2 weeks earlier, it was very sloppy, very in the mud and all, and the Cardinals just kept fumbling the ball. Chicago's emphasis is so strong on passing that the Cards rank first in aerial yardage and last in number of rushing plays. But even though they run fewer times than other teams, halfbacks John Crow and Bobby Joe Conrad are decided breakaway threats. Conrad is second in the league in rushing average, and the Cards as a team are averaging more than 6 yards a crack on the ground. We've been on our own worst enemy, admits Ivy. More fumbles last week gave the Redskins 2 touchdowns and cost the Cards 1 score. Chicago has fumbled 13 times so far in 3 games, while the Browns have yet to make a bobble. Both teams are without serious injuries and no lineup changes are planned. Now, I can't remember if the Browns fumbled the last game of the season or not, but going into the Eagle game, the Browns, after 11 games, only lost 4 fumbles all season long. They did a fantastic job of protecting the ball. All right, so now we got the Plain Dealer, October 18th, 1959 edition of the Plain Dealer. What did I got to say? There's a couple pages on this one here. Apparently the Plain Dealer's got quite a bit to say. All right. Let's see. Plain Dealer. All right, here we go. All right. Oh, I went to the wrong one. Try this again. There's 2 pages. I went to the wrong page. Let's see. Let's try this again here. There we go. All right. Browns fight to stay in the race. There's Tom Maddie of Ohio State right here. Running for a touchdown. There's Tom Maddie. Short highs Tom Maddie loose for Ohio's TD on a 32-yard dash. All right, anyway, the Browns and the Cardinals will be battling to stay in the National Football League's Eastern Division race when they meet this afternoon at 2 o'clock in the stadium. A crowd of 40,000 is anticipated for this second home game, and it could soar considerably higher than the figure if the weather turns out to be as good as predicted. Both teams own records of 1 victory and 2 defeats, with the Browns having won over the Chicagoans 34-7 in a clash at Soldier Field 2 weeks ago. Cleveland has lost to Pittsburgh and the Giants, and in other games, while the Cards defeated Washington in their opener and then dropped the return match. The 2 clubs await the kickoff in good physical shape. Halfback Ray Renfro and guard Gene Hickerson of the Browns, bothered by ailments a week back, are close to top form. The visitors are strengthened at defensive tackle by the addition of Art Hauser, former Xavier University and Los Angeles Rams lineman. He reported 2 weeks ago. Pop Ivy, the Cardinals coach, plans to start Luke Owens, former John Adams High School and Kent State stalwart, but Hauser probably will spell him. The only real veteran of the Chicago backfield is Mal Hammock at fullback, and this is only his 4th season. King Hill at quarterback, and the 2 halfbacks are John David Crow, and Bobby Joe Conrad. Here they got Booby Joe Conrad. It's a little bit of a typo there. All are pro sophomores. The Cardinals will be presenting the league's top pass receiver in veteran Woodley Lewis. He has pulled in 19 passes for 319 yards. Ivy installed a wide-open offense last season, his first as head coach in the National League. It puzzled opposing coaches in 1958, and they still, okay, so let me go to the next page here on the Plain Dealer. I said there was 2 pages here. Let's see now. I got to find it now. All right, there we are. And it says, and they still aren't sure if they have the answers. Double wing, widespread formations, some split T, and perhaps the lonesome quarterback setup probably will be seen this afternoon. The Browns beat the Cards twice last year in offensive battles. 2 weeks ago, Jim Brown staged a one-man show in the rain at Soldier Field. He carried the ball 37 times for 147 yards. Big Jim will be at fullback again, hoping to shake loose for some of the long gains, which was his forte a year ago. It was very difficult during that game for him to break loose. Basically, I remember Pop Ivy said after the game, he's like, yeah, Jim Brown just 4-yarded us to death. Basically, like every time he got the ball, he was picking up 3, 4, 5 yards every time. Every time. He didn't break nothing really long, but he was just very consistent. But that was on sloppy field. All right, so then I got one more here. Okay, refresh the page. All right, one more. All right, whoops. Share page. Screen. And we got to find, there we go. I believe it's the Cleveland News, October 18th, 1959 edition of the Cleveland News. Just get zigging and zagging straight. It's rather a simple problem for the Browns tomorrow against the Cardinals at the stadium. Don't zig when you're supposed to zag. In 3 games so far, the Browns haven't played good, hard football, but the Browns have played good, hard football, but have won only once. The stuff seems to be there. Good enough passing, superior running, sharp blocking, and better than adequate defense. But it's all hasn't meshed fully enough. There have been muff passes, muffed assignments. Perhaps Paul Brown may admit muff calls by the quarterback. Muff calls by the quarterback, Brown, because he's the one calling the plays. It adds up to 2 defeats, and this is still mid-October. Even in a league as well balanced as now, a 3rd defeat could well mean elimination from the title race. And it would. It would. The Cardinals are the one team the Browns have been able to defeat this season. The Browns have now beaten the Cardinals in 5 straight games, 3 straight times over Frank Ivy, the tall ball coach of the Cardinals. Now, Frank Ivy was a very successful coach in the Canadian Football League. He would have a little bit of a rough time here with the Cardinals, but then he would go into the AFL where he would coach the Houston Oilers and have a little bit of success there. Ivy hasn't been able to lick the Browns yet, but he admittedly scares them. Brown has full respect for Ivy's ideas featuring the double wing attack and his talented athletes. Just one statistic. Bobby Conrad of the Cardinals is averaging 8.8 yards per carry so far this season. He has made 1 run of 56 yards and a touchdown. The Cardinals have brilliant running power, with John Crow as fully as tough to handle as Conrad. And King Hill, who was the team's bonus choice a year ago and then was practically useless because of an injury, appears to be a fine forward passer. Also big and strong, he is a running threat on the quarterback option plays, the split T maneuver. Incidentally, the Cardinals have gained some defensive help for this game in Art Hauser from Xavier of Cincinnati. Hauser was the mob scene the Los Angeles Rams traded for Ollie Matson, but he had declined to report to the Cardinals until 2 weeks ago. Now he's on the roster listed as an extra defensive tackle behind Frank Fuller and Luke Owens. Is Clevelander who played at Kent State all last season. Hauser has been out with an injury. For tomorrow, the percentage seems to favor the Browns, but this year there isn't much percentage in being favored. The autumn call is upset. Ooh. All right, let's see what we got. All right, so what happened during the game? All right, so let's go here. What do we got? We got the Plain Dealer, the Cleveland Plain Dealer. October 19th, 1959 edition of the Cleveland Plain Dealer. All right, here we go. Browns stay in contention and win 17-7. There's Jim Brown. Where we got it? Tightrope walking. Jim Brown struggles to keep from crossing the chalk line and going out of bounds on this 28-yard burst in the first period. Ray Renfro, 26, is just trying to keep out of Brown's way, while the Cardinals' Jimmy Hill failed to do this, and look where he wound up. And there we go. Number 30, Brown's second touchdown. Bernie Parrish is off on a 37-yard scoring scamper after intercepting a King Hill pass in the first period. Number 80 is the Cardinals' John Tracy, while other Brownies are Vince Costello and Galen Fiss. Whoops. Now, King Hill, the quarterback for the Cardinals, I mean, had a rather lengthy career, but it was primarily as a backup. He was not somebody. I mean, once again, you also got to keep in mind, who's on his team. I mean, as I said, you look at the roster, it's like, oh my God, who is on this team? Now, perhaps if he was the quarterback of the Baltimore Colts, where they had good blocking, good running backs, they had Raymond Barry, they had Lenny Moore, maybe you had more success. But on the team of the Cardinals, yeah. All right. Mitchell and Parrish tally against the Cardinals. The Browns bounced back yesterday to stay in the pro title chase. They defeated the Chicago Cardinals 17-7 before 46,422 on a bright but windy afternoon at the stadium in a crunching but unspectacular football game. Paul Brown's club now is in a four-way tie for second place with Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and Washington in the National League's Eastern Division. So the Giants would be 3-1. The Cardinals would be 1-3, and all the other four teams are 2-2. Some of that congestion will be relieved next Sunday afternoon when the Browns play host to the Redskins. The Browns drove 82 yards for a first quarter touchdown against the Cardinals. They got a quick second one when Bernie Parrish intercepted a pass by King Hill and returned it 37 yards into the end zone for his first pro score. That initial touchdown was scored by Bobby Mitchell. The fleet pro sophomore from Illinois took a flare pass from Mill Plum and outran the secondary down the sideline on a play covering 15 yards. Lou Groza accounted for the other 5 points. He booted a 19-yard field goal after adding the extra points. Cardinals lose 2 quarterbacks. The Cardinals, now with a 1-3 mark and 2 defeats by the Browns, lost Hill, the starting quarterback, and Mac Reynolds, or actually somebody he also referred as MC Reynolds, his substitute, on successive second quarter plays. Wow. John Roach, a rangy second-year man from Southern Methodist who has been playing as a defensive back, took over and passed for the lone score. So they took a defensive secondary guy, and that was their third-string quarterback. I don't know what would have happened if he got hurt, who they would have had in there. Let's see. He found Woodley Lewis, a veteran wide receiver, completely alone behind the Browns' right side of the secondary. It was a well-executed play, good for 62 yards. That came with only seconds left in the third period. The visitors crossed midfield once, and that to the Cleveland 49 in the final 15 minutes. The Browns, who rolled up 136 of their 169 rushing yards in the first half, squandered several scoring opportunities a few minutes after Parrish scored, opportunity knocked again. John Crow shifted to fullback for this game, fumbled, and Bob Gain of the Browns recovered on the Cardinal 38. The first down wasn't made, and Groza's 43-yard field goal try of the third play of the second quarter didn't click. Near the end of that second session, the Browns marched from the 11-yard line to the Cardinals' 12. There, a fourth down try with a yard needed and less than 15 seconds left failed. It was a field goal situation for a time. Situation, Brown. It was a field goal no idea what that means. Situation. Browns for a time who caught but somehow signals got crossed. I have no idea what that guy means. The field goal situation for we caught. I did 2 minutes. I don't know. Maybe there was a fourth down, and maybe they got their signals crossed and they wanted to get a field goal in there. I have no idea what this means. That's a bit confusing right there. Jim Brown was called on 23 times and responded for 123 yards. The big fullback almost broke loose on a touchdown jaunt during the first period touchdown push, but Jim Hill of the Cardinals secondary ruined his tightrope act. Brown had gains of 28 and 14 yards in the 82-yard advance. It was the same Hill with the Browns for a time who caught. All right, let's go to the next page of the Plain Dealer, the next page of the October 19th, 1959 edition of the Plain Dealer. Let me refresh it just so. All right. There we go. Okay, let me finish. Okay, it was the same Hill with the Browns for a time who caught Mitchell from behind in a third quarter play that was called back. Bobby, former Big Ten sprint king, had a 5 or 6 yard start, but Hill, who has done the 109.5, pulled him down. Wow. Plum passes for 126 yards. Plum, who again went the distance at quarterback, connected on 12 to 22 passes for 126 yards. He was 11, I think, out of 14 2 weeks prior, but that's because they just kept handing the ball to Jim Brown. So with the running game going, obviously, usually, you got a good running game, you keep running and running and running. That usually that opens up the passing, right? And Plum was 11 for 14 2 weeks prior against the Cardinals. I had 126 yards passed in this game. Many of the aerials were of the screen or flare variety, with Mitchell grabbing 4 and Jim Brown 3. Crown, second year back from Texas A&M, or maybe that was supposed to be Crow, didn't carry the ball at all a week ago against Washington. He made up for it yesterday with 18 tries for 71 yards. Hill hit on only 1 of 3 passes before he left, and Reynolds' only aerial was incomplete. Roach, who used to be Roach, who used to be, here we go, the SMU thrower and was drafted as a possible T quarterback, completed 6 of 16 for 113 yards. Most of that yardage, of course, came on the touchdown toss to Lewis, the league's leading receiver. Roach rolled to his left, and Paul Wiggin, attempting to rush from that side, was chopped down by a good block. The quarterback looked as though he was going to throw to the short man, then noticed Lewis all alone downfield. He took aim and fired. The bullseye good for 62-yard touchdown. Cleveland intercepted 2 passes, Walt Michaels picking off a Roach throw and Parrish turning his theft into a touchdown. Walt's grab was important too, coming midway through the last quarter after a touchdown had brought the Cards new hope. The Cardinals, who now have, here we go, fumbled 15 times and lost the ball 10 at 2 yesterday. Both times gains, who seems to have the feel of playing defensive end now, recovered. The Browns, who have no fumbles charged against them in 4 games, they didn't fumble the ball in 4 games. They did not fumble the ball 1 time. Meanwhile, the Cardinals in 4 games, the same, have fumbled the ball 15 times. The Browns, who have no fumbles charged against them in 4 games, didn't take advantage of the bobbles for scores. The errors did stop the Cards from getting up momentum. It's still an uphill fight for Paul Brown and his boys, but at least they remain alive in the race. Yes, they do. And here we go. We got some... So the Browns had 18 total first downs. The Cardinals had 13. Yeah, I mean, the Browns, only 295 yards. I mean, not super impressive, right? They had 221, the Cardinals, but 169 rushing, which is a good amount. Once again, yards penalized. I mean, have you seen a lot of these games? Very minimal penalty yardage. I mean, apparently the Cardinals didn't have one accepted penalty on them. Not one. Meanwhile, the Browns had only 38 yards. I mean, today's game sometimes is almost unbearable to watch with the amount of penalties that get thrown. It's absolutely freaking ridiculous. Here we go. We got some statistics here. Oh, let me zoom in here. John David Crow, 18 times for 71 yards. I mean, it just wasn't a good day. I mean, you can say, wasn't a good running day. But you ran 16 times for 45 yards, Brown 23 times for 120. That's what you wanted. Between those two guys, they ran the ball almost 40 times for 168 yards. So, Will Plum was the only other one. Because he ran, I don't know, it was a quarterback snake or what the heck it was, but not a lot of completed passes. But I mean, this is what you got with the Cardinals. I mean, Hill, Reynolds, and Roach, those were the quarterbacks. I mean, these are the starting two quarterbacks. They were 1 for 4. I mean, they just did not have the horses, that is for sure. All right, so now we're going to go to the Cleveland Press, the October 19th, 1959 edition of the Cleveland Press. What do they got to say in the game here? Okay. Oh, here it is. Here's the man with the ball. Let me just refresh this here so it doesn't screw up on me. Okay, here we go. We played better losing, Paul Brown. Browns are champions of the Chicago Cardinals. To become champions of the Eastern Division, they've got to start beating the other opponents on the schedule. Next opportunity in that direction comes Sunday at the stadium against the Redskins. That appears to be a good spot for Paul Brown to hammer home his we play the games one at a time philosophy. There's a whopper coming up for this team the following week in Baltimore. But it could be disastrous to look ahead to that one and take the Skins lightly. Washington is in a four-way tie with the Browns for second place, and one of the Redskins' victories was over Pittsburgh, the club that spoiled the season opener for Cleveland. The Browns ran out of games with their favorite cousins, the Cardinals, after yesterday 17-7 triumph before 46,422 fans at the stadium. They made it 18 out of 20 for Cleveland in the series, and you'd think the Browns would regret that they must wait until next year for the next Cardinal party. That's not the case, though. I'm glad. Playing them, exclaimed Brown. They're unlike any other team in the league, and I'm happy to have them out of the way. We played better losing last week than we did winning this week, he continued. I'm glad we won. So he played better against the Giants when they lost 10-6 than they did this week when they beat the Cardinals 17-7. I'm glad we won, but I don't feel very good about the way we look doing it. Except for the outcome, the game had much in common with the loss to New York a week ago yesterday in respect to the Browns' performance. The defense did another outstanding job. I mean, they held the Giants to 10 points. They held the 3 weeks in a row, they held the Cardinals to 7 points, they held the Giants to 10 points, and they held the Cardinals to 7 points. So the defense has been doing a very good job for the Browns so far this season. Just their offense. They haven't scored. They scored over 30 points one time, but other than that, haven't scored a lot of points. Except for the outcome, the game had much in common with the loss to New York a week ago yesterday in respect to the Browns' performance. The defense did another outstanding job, and the offense moved better than the score indicates. The Browns rolled up 82 yards in the first quarter, 78 yards in the second, 55 yards in the third quarter, and were stopped on the Cards' 6 in the fourth quarter after Walt Michaels intercepted a pass. Also, Bobby Mitchell had a 68-yard dash nullified by a penalty in the last half. Meanwhile, a 62-yard John Roach to Woodley Lewis pass play late in the third quarter was Chicago's lone thrust. The Cards' next best advance of the day reached only to the Browns' 47. Chicago, despite a revamped backfield with John Crow at fullback for the first time, gained only 98 yards rushing, and half of the Cards' aerial progress came on the TD play. However, Pop Ivy's club suffered a double blow midway through the second quarter when quarterbacks King Hill and MC Reynolds were injured and sidelined for the afternoon on successive plays. Mill Plum was off target on many passes, but after Jim Brown and Mitchell chewed up 68 yards on 9 consecutive running plays, the quarterback hit Mitchell with a pass in the left flat for Cleveland's first touchdown in the opening period. Mitchell swarmed out of the grasp of defensive back Billy Stacy and ran 14 yards. Cleveland's lead went to 14-0 2 minutes later when left cornerback Bernie Parrish picked off a pass by Hill and ran 37 yards. Lou Groza got the final 3 points with a 19-yard field goal in the third quarter. The Browns' offense was hampered by the loss of left guard Jimmy Ray Smith, only 9.5 minutes into the game. Smith was kicked above the left ankle, and although the injury apparently wasn't serious, Chuck Noll, maybe you've heard of him, took his place as a precautionary measure. Noll did well at a strange position, but wasn't as effective as Smith in pulling out and blocking for Mitchell on wide plays. All right, let's see where we go. Is this one here? Card game is full of tricks. Paul Brown called it a weird game that was a good word for some of the plays yesterday. Milt Plum had the unusual experience of catching his own pass. Bobby Mitchell lost a 68-yard gallop when the Browns were penalized for assisting the runner, and the players ignored the field goal attempt ordered by Brown. Plum's pass came on a 3rd and 5 situation late in the first half. A Cardinal player leaped up and batted the toss back into Plum's arms, and the quarterback broke away from a swarm of players for a 20-yard gain. If I had a little more speed, I could have gone all the way, said Milt. Johnny Unitas of the Colts caught one like that last year, and Wyatt Tittle of the 49ers did it 2 weeks ago. Captain Mike McCormack was called by an official for pushing Mitchell through a jam of players in the line of scrimmage and sending him on his way to a long run. We bumped, and I tried to get out of Mitchell's way, said the tackle. It happened so fast that I don't recall, but I didn't intentionally give him any assistance. The rule states no player on offense may assist runner except by individually blocking opponents for him. The Browns were on the Cards 12 in the final minute of the first half with 3rd and 1 yard for a first down. During a timeout, Brown sent in orders for an end run by Jim Brown and then a field goal. If the fullback failed to score, and then a field goal if the fullback failed to score. Jim was stopped with no gain, and some of the players rushed back to the huddle and said there was time for one more play and at least a first down before the kick. Carpenter lined up on the wrong side in a confusion. The defense swung his way, and Brown was tossed for a 2-yard loss. I'm waiting for someone to call a timeout to get the kicking team in, and instead they ran another play, exclaimed Brown. We've saved a timeout just for that purpose. That's the human element, I guess. Another odd play came just before the half when Plum, falling backward under the impact of a tackle, tossed a two-handed basketball pass to Brown to turn a loss on the play into a 5-yard gain. There's Jim Brown. All right, what we got here? The more I see football, let me see, is this the one? Is this, oh, no, blah, 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 blah. Yesterday, here we go. Yesterday at the stadium, I'm up here, right? It was the defensive unit of the Browns, which got way up for a very important game with the Cardinals. Pop Ivy's double and triple wingers had gone more yards than any National League team entering this contest, but the Browns handled the slick something without much trouble, proving again that men are more important than systems. My Jimmies and Joes will beat your X's and O's, they say. I will have to guess that John David Crow and Bobby Joe Conrad, they've got to have three names in the Cardinal multiple offense, would have done just as well running from the antiquated short punt. It took a long shot pass from John Roach to Woodley Lewis to score for the Cardinals. It was a good thing that the Browns were able to contain the Cardinal ground game because their own offense just didn't seem to hang together. At one point, with just seconds to go in the first half, some of the boys even lost track of the time. Coach Ball Brown wanted Lou Groza to kick what should have been an easy field goal from about the 19, but the Browns snapped into a fourth down running play with Jim Brown carrying it and it failed to make the yardage. My neighbors in Section 11 were quite distressed over this, and properly so, but it was a case of the hired hands believing they could sneak in one more play before the field goal attempt. I came away from the ball game with the feeling that the Browns had looked better losing the week before to the New York Giants, and I agree with Coach Brown's usual wrap-up of any game. We may not feel happy about the way it happened, but what they put on the scoreboard is what matters most in this game. It was an intriguing game in some of the aspects. The most intriguing play came in the third period when Milt Plum completed a pass to Milt Plum. Milt threw a flare pass out to his left that was batted back to him in the air by the Russian Cardinals. Plum grabbed it and dashed 20 yards for a first down. If you are uncertain how to record this, be comforted by the knowledge that so was Eddie Finnegan, the official recorder for the home games of the Browns. Eddie had to look deep into the rule book before deciding to put it down as a completed pass. There was another play that was unusual, to say the very least, about. Bobby Mitchell started through a narrow hole in the Chicago line, paused, and then was flung and pushed through it by Mike McCormick. This is not cricket in football, and Mitchell's long run was recalled. All right, there's another one here. Okay, here we go. The Cleveland Press here. Let's see if we find this here. Where we at? The Cleveland Press. My bad. There we go. October 19th, 1959 edition of the Cleveland Press. I know this one right here. Whoops. Refresh the page. I got the stats over here. Once again, the same stats. They just showed you from the other paper. And that's what you like to see. Boy, almost 40 runs between Brown and Mitchell. All right, we got here. Jim Brown still leads the National Football League in rushing, but Ollie Matson of the Rams is staying right on his heels. And not far behind both of them is J.D. Smith of the 49ers. The four-game totals now read: Brown 437 yards, Matson 403, and Smith 371. Brown gained 123 yards against the Cardinals yesterday. Smith gained 123 against the Lions, and Matson picked up 121 against the Packers. Nearly everyone in the park was startled to see Bobby Mitchell, with quite a head start, hauled down from behind by the Cards' Jim Hill on a 62-yard run that didn't count yesterday. However, the defensive back ran the 109.5 seconds in high school and grabbed 134 passes and scored 16 TDs as an end at Sam Houston College. Hill, a 5-year veteran, has a daily radio show in Dallas, which he does on tape during the season. He also writes sports columns for several papers in Texas. John Rhodes, a regular safety man with the Cardinals, played quarterback for the first time as a pro after King Hill and MC Reynolds were hurt. He was the Cardinals' third draft choice in 1956, but spent the last 2 years in the Air Force. We started him as a passer in training camp, but decided we needed the help on defense more, said Frank Ivy. He was been doing some practicing and quarterbacking, though. Roach threw well and would have had much more than 6 for 113 if his receivers had held a half dozen other perfect passes. He hails from the same Dallas high school that produced Bobby Lane and Doak Walker. Wow. Hill's passing arm was hurt, but he's expected to be ready next weekend. Reynolds re-injured his knee and may be out for a while. X-rays were to be taken today of Jimmy Ray Smith's leg and Galen Fisk's back, but both men called the damage minor. Luke Rose's conversion after the first TD was his 317th in the National Football League and erased the record set by Bobby Waterfield with Cleveland and Los Angeles Rams from 1945 to 52. Bob Gain recovered both Cardinals fumbles. He said, "Just lucky," he said. "I've had them roll into my arms and couldn't hold them." Card and Leo Sugar had a tooth broken off, and the blow that did it kept him out of the second half. Rookie Floyd Peters replaced Sid Youngelman at the defensive right tackle in the last half, and the Browns fans may see more of him in the future. Youngelman was having his trouble, said Brown. The Cards were picking on him. "Just hungry, I guess," laughed Bernie Parrish after being complimented for a fine bit of broken field running and a scoring after intercepting a pass. Chuck Noll admitted it felt strange and took a while to get adjusted after he took over for Smith. "Maybe next week you can play end," said one wag. "I thought the Browns played as hard as I've ever seen them play," said Ivy. Now here's a pass. It got broken up. Night Train Lane, number 81. Breaks up play in the third quarter at the stadium. Mill Plum's pass was intended for Billy Houghton. All right, and I got a couple more here. Chicago Tribune, October 19th, 1959 edition of the Chicago Tribune. All right, what do they got to say here? All right, Chicago Tribune. Here we go. Alan Amici, the horse gallops. Gallops for a touchdown against the Bears. All right. But see, you notice right here, right? Yeah, because this just goes to show you what kind of attention the Cardinals get in Chicago. This is the Chicago Tribune. Colts late rally beats the Bears, right? Takes right up here. And even here, you got the Rams rout the Packers. And then, oh, by the way, you had Cardinals lose. So you got the Rams and the Packers over. You get more, get the attention first before the Cardinals do. And then big bold letters up here have the Bears. And the Cardinals are over here. And there's Ollie Matson doing his thing. All right, so Reynolds and Hill. Here we go. Reynolds and Hill hurt in 17-7 defeat. Trumped again. Here's the starting offensive lineups for both teams. There's the substitutes. All right. Chicago Cardinals lost both of their experienced quarterbacks in the second quarter of Sunday's National Football League engagement with the Browns in Cleveland. But as it turned out, the Cardinals already had lost the game in the first period. The Browns made a pair of early touchdowns stand up for a 17-7 victory and deprived John Roach of a chance of becoming a hero. Roach, former Southern Methodist star whose Cardinal service has been confined to the defensive secondary, played the entire second half at quarterback. His 62-yard touchdown pass to end Woodley Lewis in the third quarter gave the crowd of 46,422 a brief scare, but wasn't enough to prevent the Browns from balancing their record at 2 victories against an equal number of losses. The Cardinals' defeat, their third in a row since an inaugural triumph over Washington on Sunday long ago, dropped them further into the Eastern Division cellar. Every conceivable circumstance went against the Cardinals. Quarterback King Hill was helped from the field in the second quarter with a bruised right arm between the elbow and shoulder. His replacement, MC Reynolds, got in on only one play before he too was whisked to the sidelines with a recurrence of an ankle injury. Neither injury, however, was serious, and both players should be ready when the Cardinals meet the Philadelphia Eagles in Minneapolis next Sunday. And the Cardinals will be the home team for that game. The Cards lost the ball on fumbles. They got away a touchdown. They gave away a touchdown on an intercepted pass that should never have been thrown. But in the final analysis, the Cards lost because the Browns stopped their offense cold. The Chicagoans' fancy double-wing tee failed to dazzle the Browns, who politely laid it in wait until all the tricky handoffs were completed, then moved in for the kill at the line of scrimmage. Meanwhile, the Browns maintained ball control with a cautious blend of power running by Jim Brown, wide sweeps by Bobby Mitchell, and passing of Milt Plum. Brown, Cleveland's smooth-wheeling fullback, who used the Cards as a springboard to a league rushing record last season, rambled through the Chicago line for 123 yards and 23 carries. When Brown wasn't gaining yardage with ridiculous ease on draw plays and off, all right, we'll go to the last page here of the Chicago Tribune, the October 19th, 1959 edition of the Chicago Tribune. Let's see here. What are they going to say? Refresh. And it's this. There we go. All right, here we go. When Brown wasn't gaining yardage with ridiculous ease on draw plays and off tackle smashes, Mitchell was haunting the Cardinal linebackers and cornerbacks and keeping the Chicago defense loose as a pass receiver. Hill, the Cards' regular quarterback, was completely off his game. The one-time Rice star completed only one of three aerial attempts, and it gave the Browns their first touchdown by interception. Hill, attempting to hit Joe Childress with a sideline pass late in the opening quarter, instead planted the ball in the hands of Bernie Parrish, Cleveland's left cornerback. Parrish easily covered the 37 yards to the goal line. Earlier, the Browns had scored on a 15-yard swing pass from Plum to Mitchell, which culminated a march of 83 yards in 10 plays. After a scoreless second quarter, Lou Groza kicked an 18-yard field goal in the third period to build the Browns' lead to 17-0. Roach, who could develop into an effective quarterback with experience, ruined the Browns' shutout later in the third quarter with a looping pass to Lewis, who caught the ball on the Cleveland 13 and sped into the end zone. What small chance the Cards had of further closing the gap was nullified by a series of drop passes. Roach 3 times put the ball in the hands of end John Tracy, but the rookie, usually a reliable receiver, couldn't hang on. In a surprising move, coach Frank Ivey of the Cardinals converted halfback John Crow into a fullback. Crow responded by gaining 71 yards on 18 carries, but the Cards needed more than that on this windy afternoon. And here's the pass the Milt Plum completed to himself. He's running here. Among the passing yards gained by Milt Plum, Cleveland quarterback Milt Plum was his 20-yarder in the second period Sunday against the Cardinals. Chicago's Frank Fuller batted the ball into the air. Plum grabbed it and took off. And there he is for a 20-yard gain. What we got here? Oh, here's the Bears. Willie Gallimore took a pitch out from Zeke Bratkowski, headed around the Colts right end, and then cut back inside. Total 30 yards for the Bears' only touchdown. Maybe only offensive touchdown. I don't know. Well, only touchdown. Yeah, 21-7. There you go. So, but that's just the way it was. I mean, the Cardinals just the the razzle dazzle plays. Sometimes they worked. But the way it is that with a lot of offenses, it confuses you, which is what Frank Pop Ivey's offense did. But as time wore on, you can start figuring stuff out. And, the Browns had just seen the same offense 2 weeks prior. And they were, for the most part, the Cardinals had a third-string quarterback in there by most of the game. And so they knew they probably weren't going to get beat by passing. So they just can kind of concentrate on stopping the run, and that was something they were able to do. And, of course, when you got Bobby Mitchell and Jim Brown back there, Lil Plum, can kind of pick and choose where he's going to want it. Well, he's not the one calling the plays. Paul Brown is. But, you can kind of pick and choose when you're going to pass the ball. And, if you got Mitchell and Brown and you can keep the other team off the board, I mean, just keep handing the ball to Brown and Mitchell. Those guys don't fumble the ball. The Browns played 4 games and didn't fumble the ball 1 time in 4 games. Meanwhile, the Cardinals fumbled the ball 15 times in 4 games. And, they say, turnovers kill you. And as you say, in this one game right here, even with the third-string quarterback in there, the Browns only won by 10 points. Cardinals lost by 10 points with the third-string quarterback in there. And one of their touchdowns for the Browns came right off of a turnover. If you can't, but I said, if you take that one turnover away, right, the score would have been 10-7. Right, so those turnovers will kill you, and they killed the Cardinals when they played the Browns 2 weeks prior, because the Cardinals threw, I think, 1 interception and lost 4 fumbles against the Browns 2 weeks prior. So, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, 2 good ways of looking at this. The Browns not only had the far superior roster, but they just played better football. And for the Cardinals, I mean, they would play hard every game, but they just did not have the horses. They really didn't have very good quarterback play. Didn't have super spectacular defense or anything like that. And they were just outmanned, as it would show. Because I mean, the Browns wanted to finish 7-5 and tied for second place. Meanwhile, the Cardinals would only win 2 games all season, and they couldn't wait for the 59 season to get over with fast enough. So that's the way it was on this date, October 18th, 1959, as the Chicago Cardinals would play the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland Stadium in pro football, first 50 years. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.